Hey everyone, I'm Danny Tuckett. I work for Big Stone County and I am the environmental technician. Um, Suzanne asked me to do a video for you guys, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, how I got this job, and what I do for this job. And then I'm going to show you guys how tell you a little bit about some aquatic invasive species and how that works into my job, and also how to properly and safely inspect your boats. So next time you guys go out on the lake, you can make sure you're not transporting any invasive species. All right, so like I said, I'm the environmental technician for Big Stone County, and what that means is one of my job titles under that is I'm the aquatic invasive species coordinator. Um, Hopefully, you guys know what aquatic invasive species are. If not, I will just do a quick overview what that is. Aquatic invasive species are things that animals, plants that have come from somewhere else, so they are not native. That's why they're invasive. Another reason they're invasive is um, since they come here, they don't have any natural predators, anything that eats them, something that balances them out, so they kind of take over the system. And that's another reason why they're invasive. Obviously, aquatic means they're in the water. There are regular invasive species, but my job only deals with aquatic invasive species, so things that are in the water, plants, animals in the water. Um, so yeah, that's what aquatic invasive species is, and I'm the coordinator for that. And part of my job is to we get money from the state, and um, I'm I work with Suzanne and a few other people, the DNR Fisheries, Soil and Water, Watershed District. We all work together trying to figure out the best way to use that money to try and slow the spread of invasive species and how to prevent them in any way possible. Um, so next, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got this job and what I went to school for. I went to good old Bemidji State right here. I graduated from there in 2017. Played football there, uh, and what I went to school for was aquatic biology. Actually, um, throughout my college career, I did some internships with the DNR Fisheries here in Ortonville, and what I did there was just fisheries things, trapping fish, doing seines, water sampling, things like that. Anything related to the water in the lakes around the area. That's kind of what I did with that internship, and I fell in love with that. So that's kind of the direction I went. Um, I did a 4 year degree, got my bachelor's degree in aquatic biology, emphasis on fisheries. So then once I saw this job, I worked with invasive species and working on cleaning our boats and cleaning our nets like that with my internships. And so that kind of and I learned about it in school, invasive species. So all those things kind of tied into my job right now. And my other two parts of my job also deal with water and how they affect plants and animals and stuff like that. So I'm loving the job. Started here in 2018, and it's been pretty good to me. Some of you guys, if you're from the area, you might know my in-laws. My wife was Brenna Geese. Now she's Brenna Tuckett, obviously. And their sisters are Michaela and Sienna Rassett. So some of you guys might know them. And that's how I came to this area. I grew up in Madison, Minnesota. So some of you guys know where that's at too. So like I said, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about invasive species, and I'm going to show you how to properly inspect your boats. When I'm not there inspecting boats, which is the majority of the time, we can only be sitting at the axes at certain times of the day. Can't be there 24/7. So you have to learn how to inspect boats yourself. So you're not getting tickets and not spreading any invasive species. So some of the biggest or the most well-known, highest priority invasive species that we are trying to prevent and spread are, the first one I'll start with are zebra mussels. Some of you guys, most of you guys probably know what those are. They're like little tiny clams, pretty much. They get to be like the size of my pinky nail right there. What they do, if you've ever watched SpongeBob, you know what plankton is, just tiny little plankton. It's what makes water green and things like that. Those zebra mussels actually will filter that water and eat those plankton, eat all the small things in the water, so then it competes with the small fish and larger fish and things like that. And that's why they have, part of the reason why they become a problem in the state of Minnesota. Another thing is they just multiply like crazy. Yeah, sorry, lost my track of thought right there. They multiply like crazy. Wherever you find zebra mussels, there's probably a lot of them around, or you can find a lot of them around. They pretty much, if you've ever been up north where there is some, they pretty much cover the whole bottoms of the lake once they've colonized there. And it can create hazards. It's bad for people pumping water out of the lakes, it clogs up pipes, things like that. You have to start wearing water shoes if they come to your lake, because the shells will actually start cutting your feet if you try to swim in, things like that. So like I said, they're not really that great of a thing to be having. There are some benefits. They make the water cleaner, but that's really about it. They provide food for some things like sheephead and sturgeon, but other than that, they're an invasive species, so we want to prevent them from coming into our lakes as long as possible. If at all, we don't want them to come into our lakes. So that's one of them. Another one that we watch out for is curly leaf pondweed. If you've been on Big Stone Lake at all in the last few years, that's one of the biggest nuisance plants in our lake right now, is curly leaf pondweed. And one reason that's invasive is because it grows underneath the ice. Just like most land plants, when it becomes winter, they don't grow, they've shed their leaves, they're kind of dormant, they're sleeping pretty much, except, and that's the same in lakes. When it's cold, there's a few plants that do grow, but not very many of them do. They kind of go dormant or sleeping throughout the winter, and then once ice comes off, that's when they start to grow again, once they get a lot more sunlight and get that temperature of the water coming up. But curly leaf pondweed is a little bit different. They actually start growing once the ice comes on the lake, or shortly before the ice comes on the lake. So they start growing throughout the winter and compete with other plants in the lake. And when they do that, then those other plants, once they're ready to start growing, they don't have any room, they don't have nutrients, they don't have sunlight, things like that. So then they're in competition with that curly leaf pondweed, and eventually the curly leaf will kind of wipe them out too. And that's what makes them invasive. Another thing about curly leaf pondweed is in the summer it grows all the way to the top of the water, and then it becomes very difficult to swim and boat and things like that. It'll clog up your boat motor. And that positives about curly leaf pondweed are it's thick vegetation, or some of you call it seaweed, or you like to call it vegetation. And what that vegetation does, provides oxygen for fish in the water, just like trees provide oxygen for us, or anything green provides oxygen for us. That's the same thing that it does in the lakes. Some other things that it does is provide hiding spots or homes for fish and bugs, and a whole bunch of other things that creates good habitat for the fish to live in, to hide so they don't get eaten, things like that. So there's a few benefits to having these invasive species. So you got to take your pros and your cons for each one of them. One other one that's been we've been on the lookout for that's pretty new is called starry stonewort. And what that one is, it's a plant just like curly-leaf pondweed, but this one is a lot smaller. It's actually an algae, but it looks like a plant. If you grab it, just some big green gobs. And pretty much that one takes over the whole lake, blocks sunlight, just grows and grows and grows. Becomes difficult to swim and boat. And that as well, it's really hard to manage. And the dangerous thing about that too is if you get little parts of it on your boat and you go to another lake, those little parts can grow and reproduce and make new plants in the lake. So that's a big reason why we check, another big reason why we check boats and things like that. I'll get into that a little bit more once I start walking through how to properly inspect your boats. But I wish I could ask questions right now, but this is a recording. If you have any questions before I start this boat thing, just ask Suzanne for my information, I guess. And you guys can contact me, or I'm not really sure how she's setting the Zoom up. But yeah, if you got any questions, I'm sure she can answer some of them, or if she can't, she can contact me and I can try and answer them for you. So part of my job as the coordinator too is to inspect boats. Some of you guys may have seen me in the last couple summers, and I sit at the boat access, and when I see someone pull up or come off the lake, the DNR gives me a list of questions that I have to ask you when you come off, and then I check your boat, make sure your boat's clean, and you're not so that you're not transporting anything. Some of the questions I'll ask you is what lake you were on before this, how long has your boat been out of the water. I ask those things because if you came from another lake that had invasive species, it's just another reason for me to double and triple check that you don't have any invasive species on your boat. And then how long you've been out of the water is a rule of thumb is if you've been on an infested lake is to have your boat dry for 5 days. That will mostly kill all invasive species is if if you let it dry, because they need water to live. So some other questions I'll ask them are when they come off the lake, how long they were on the water, because zebra mussels, if they were on the water for more than 24 hours, that's how long it takes a zebra mussel to attach to a boat or a watercraft. And then where they're heading next. They just keep track of that so then we can figure out some high traveled lakes and things like that. So I'm asking all these questions while I'm checking the boat and while they're unhooking and getting everything ready to go fishing or tubing or whatever they're doing. And I send them on their way. So I'm going to show you, if I can flip the camera here, how I look for a boat. I guess I'll just turn my camera like this. Okay, so here we are at the front of the boat. This is where I always start when I inspect the boat. I'll look in these rollers here. I'll look in the chains, things like that. This is kind of where you should start, just because it's easier to go loop around your boat. Just look on here. You feel along your boat like this. I'm feeling for any type of jagged edges, things like that, because it'll feel like sandpaper. Sometimes you can't see those small zebra mussels, but if you feel a little bit of sandpaper like things, you can take a closer look and see if there's any zebra mussels attached there, because they're pretty hard to see when they're pretty small. You look in these rollers here for any plants or anything attached on there. Then you can look on the trailer itself. Look for any weeds or vegetation on there. And then I just start walking along the boat here, all the way down. Check underneath. Like I said, I run my hand along the water line where the water would sit on the boat right here. This is where the water would be. And then I'm also checking in the wheel wells underneath here. I have a little flashlight. I can look underneath those. And I look back behind the wheel. Hopefully this video turns out for you guys. And I check these rollers too. Those places are really good places for small, tight, dark places, are good places where zebra mussels to attach. And then those rollers, things that weeds can get wrapped up on, pretty easy, is something else I look for. Then I work my way to the back of the boat. Another thing we have to check for when we are doing inspections is make sure the drain plug is out. And why we check that is because zebra mussels, when they reproduce, they pretty much splurt their babies out into the water, and they're microscopic, which means you can't see them with the naked eye. So that's actually a law in Minnesota, that you have to take out your drain plug. This is where my drain plug would be. Let's see, right there. So mine is out, and let's see if I can find it so you know what it looks like. Right here, this is your drain plug. Goes in that hole, and when you're traveling or not in the water, that's supposed to be out. So it drains any water that's in your boat, so you're not transporting any water in your boat. Same goes for your live wells. I'll check people's live wells. Make sure there's not any water in them. If there's fish in them, they can put ice in it or things like that to keep the fish fresh. But then you drain all lake water out of it. Pretty much I don't have to sit there and wait for them to drain it completely. I just have to have them pull the plug so I know it's draining, and they can drive home while it's draining. It's just how you're just not supposed to keep that water in your boat. Other places I'll check is on the transom here. Let's see, check on here. Underneath there, you're looking for zebra mussels that I've attached. Checking in the prop here, propeller, anything that weeds can often get wrapped up in here. Zebra mussels, like I said, they like dark places. They'll hide up in here, things like that. So I check all along this backside. See if there's anything attached. If there is, if there's something under the boat, I'll grab one of those garbage picker upper things and reach under there if I can't reach it with my hands. And that's really about it. Then you just obviously check the other side of the boat as you're going through. Some other things that you should check when you're coming off the lake is your anchor. Let's see, here's my anchor. You just want to make sure there's no dirt, no mud, any weeds or anything like that too, because you're still transporting it if it's in the boat. Things like the seeds called turions of curly leaf pondweed, that's often in the mud. Sometimes zebra mussels are mixed in with the rocks and mud. So if that's on your anchors or on anything or in your boat, you need to make sure you clean that up, rinse out your boat, things like that, because you don't want to potentially bring that to another lake. So I pretty much tried my best to show you how to do it. I wish I could do it in person for you guys. But that's pretty much how you should, every time before you go into a lake and when you come off the lake, that's what you should do, is look at your boat from the front to the back and all sides, underneath, and things like that, to make sure you're not transporting any invasive species or non-invasive species for that matter. Just make sure your boat's clean. The phrase we like to say is clean, drain your boat, and dry your boat. That will help prevent the spread of invasive species. Again, my name is Danny Tuckett. I hope you guys learned something today. If you have any questions, like I said, Suzanne, or you can go to bigstonecounty.org and be able to contact me on there. Hope you guys have a good day. Talk to you later.